Colleagues, welcome across the nation, live from Minnesota. This is the penultimate webinar in our TZD webinar series for 2021. And while I'm excited about today really fits hand in glove with our final session this coming Wednesday. So if you have not yet bookmarked your reservation and gotten your ticket for admission to that festival event, you'll want to do so. Today is the prep thinking work for that. And when you hear Colonel Langer and his colleagues on Wednesday, the pieces will start to crystallize and come together. But today, I am just excited about what we have in store for us. And so thank you. Welcome to this seminar. Today, we're going to be talking about TZD 2.0, the next generation. I'm Mark Kindy. I'm one of the TZD co-chairs for Minnesota. I'm the manager of the Injury and Violence Prevention section of the Minnesota Department of Health. We today are thanking in particular all of those who've helped put together the TZD series. We have organizers for the sessions. We've got some of the e-leaders, we've got speakers, moderators, technology experts, a number of folks behind the scenes, and our partnership with the Center for Transportation Studies at the University of Minnesota has just been outstanding to help make this happen. Without all of you doing what you've done, this would not have happened. So thank you. I'm grateful also for our hosts, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, our Minnesota Department of Transportation, and the Minnesota Department of Health. Thanks to each of you. And we've got an array of sponsors who have just been rock solid. Bolton and Menk, AAA Minnesota Iowa, the Auto Club Group, HDR, Highway Credit Union, and the Minnesota Prevention Alliance. Thanks to each of you for supporting traffic safety and the TZD program. I'm grateful. Now, my colleague Christine Hernandez is going to moderate today's session and introduce our speakers. Christine has a remarkable, as you know, remarkable depth in TZD, in what TZD looks like, translation from the kind of the research concept to on the ground. And Christine, thanks for taking this on. I'm cheering you on as I listen and learn and react to our speakers.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Christine Hernandez. I'm the state TZD program coordinator and the TZD 2.0 project manager at the Minnesota Department of Transportation Office of Traffic Engineering. For those of you who joined late, this is TZD 2.0, the next generation. But first, a few housekeeping notes. There's both a chat box and a Q&A box. If you have questions for our speakers, please put it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can also ask for technical help through the chat box. We'll get to your question at the conclusion of the presentations. If there's a question that needs immediate attention, I can ask it at an appropriate time. For this webinar series is proud to offer continuing education credits. These listed credits are available for this webinar. To find the forms, please go to the TZD 2.0 website or webpage on the TZD website. And then for our law enforcement officers, the post board credits are also available. Please read this important announcement from the post board. Whether you're watching the webinar live or recorded, please watch the webinar in its entirety and follow the instructions on the TZD website. The link to the webpage can be found in the chat box. The University of Minnesota will submit your completed affidavit of attendance, report to the post board for you. Now I'd like to introduce our two speakers that will talk about TZD 2.0 today. Katie is our first speaker, Katie Caskey. She's the Strategic Communications Manager at HDR. She has 10 years of experience in transportation planning with a focus on public engagement and strategic communications. She's experienced in developing and executing creative engagement strategies, managing complex projects, communicating technical information to diverse audiences through facilitation and relationship building. Katie previously worked as the Policy Planning Director at the Minnesota Department of Transportation and brings a wide array of knowledge about transportation issues and trends. Our other speaker is Keiko Lisi. Keiko is a senior consultant with the Pinnacle Performance Group. She's a proven leader with a long and deep history in the public and nonprofit sector. She brings her experience in strategic engagement, process development, and collaboration. This includes facilitation, content development, and project management skills, which was honed across sectors and in a variety of communities. Always interested in developing relationships to better understanding underlying perspectives, values, and goals, she holds a deep respect and abiding commitment to authentic engagement to move organizations forward. Lisi holds a Master's of Public Policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota and a bachelor's degree from Trinity College. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband, daughter, and son. She enjoys traveling, hiking, and camping, and is an avid sports fan. I'll now turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Christine. We're gonna chat through kind of this TZD 2.0 project, which is really focused on breathing new life into Minnesota's Towards Zero Deaths program. So before we get started, we kind of want to just lay the groundwork for why this project kind of came into existence and what we were hoping to accomplish by looking at kind of the next generation of TZD. This trend line is probably familiar to most of you on this call, but this is, over the last 20 so years of Minnesota traffic safety, this is the fatality trend line. And, TZD was founded about, 18, 19 years ago now. And for the first kind of several years of the program, there was a sharp decline in traffic fatalities in Minnesota. But over recent years, that trend line has really started to plateau and even tick up. So TZD leadership kind of started asking the question, why are we seeing this plateau? And they undertook kind of two efforts to kind of look to address that question. The first was updating the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which was adopted in 2020. And that was really looking at emphasis areas, strategies, tactics. What do we as traffic safety professionals need to do and focus on in Minnesota to push that trend line down? And this project is kind of complementary to that work. This project is really looking at the structure and operations of the Towards Zero Death program and asking the question, are we kind of set up well as we should be to be able to enable all the great traffic safety work that will help push that trend line down? So really the two big questions of this work are, what role does the current program structure and operations play in TZD's effectiveness in reducing fatalities and serious injuries on Minnesota roadways? And what changes to the program structure and operations will help TZD be more effective at achieving those goals? So how do we go about doing this? The focus of today's webinar is really going to focus on kind of the story, kind of how we implemented this approach to kind of get to some draft recommendations. The recommendations are still very much draft and this project is still very much in the works, but wanted to kind of lay that groundwork and kind of take you all along that journey with us. And some of you might have seen different versions of this. We've been out talking about this project and about workshopping some of the draft recommendations with different stakeholders. So just want to acknowledge that you'll see some of you might have seen some of this content already, but hopefully this helps to kind of build that narrative and as we work through the recommendations. So we started by really understanding the possibilities, looking at traffic safety literature, looking at traffic safety programs in other states, doing the equity crash analysis, and other things that I'll dive into to kind of just really get the lay of the land and understand kind of what was possible with this work. We then moved on to a lot of engagement to kind of understand how TZD is operating today. We conducted engagement at the regional workshops this spring, which many of you might have participated in. We had a statewide kind of survey. We did a number of individual follow-up interviews with both current TZD stakeholders, as well as kind of folks that maybe aren't involved or haven't been involved, but that have a relationship with traffic safety. And we had a kind of a steering committee helping to guide this project. And that work was really focused on helping to understand where TZD is today and what are the challenges and opportunities. We then kind of took all of that background information and kind of pulled it together to kind of analyze opportunities. What are those areas for improvement, or areas that program structure and operations changes to those could help promote traffic safety work in Minnesota and help the work of traffic safety partners be more effective. And that's kind of where we are today, is kind of, we've identified those opportunities. We're starting to kind of pull together some draft recommendations and are workshopping them with stakeholders and TZD leadership to then move forward to kind of the implementation step. So to dive a little bit deeper into kind of all of that work that got us to where we are today, starting with kind of the background work in that first bucket. We conducted a traffic safety literature review. We looked at a number of different documents that kind of addressed how traffic safety programs are structured and operating. And then with the steering committee, selected kind of the top 4 that we really wanted to dive into, that we thought might have the best insights for TZD. And some of the key takeaways from that work is that it's really most common amongst traffic safety programs out there today for a single agency or small group of agencies to have the most control. There's kind of 2 different models of leadership that are out there. Some programs are agency-led and others are more executive-led at kind of the governor office level. In both models, there was risk for kind of initiatives being deprioritized when either agency or executive leadership change. Top-down leadership was really kind of the most common, especially to get things started. There was some kind of inkling that that maybe could shift over time, and things can become more decentralized as programs got more established. But really, that top-down leadership was the most common to get things started. But that also came with the risk of burdening some of those at the center of the program and kind of underutilizing some of the skills of other partners. Collaboration with local agency was key kind of in all of the work that we reviewed. Successful programs prioritize safety by creating a safety culture and adopting a safe system approach. And there was kind of an identified need to really establish measures and to track accomplishments. We also kind of did a deep dive into organizational design kind of theory and really looked at how their different organizations can be structured and kind of the pros and cons of those different structures. We drew from a variety of for-profit, nonprofit, and public sector structures to kind of get the lay of the land. We looked at kind of TZD's current structure, and we looked at, then we kind of identified some promising structures with an eye kind of towards some of the challenges identified for TZD in the setup of this project and in that case for change. And I'm not going to go too much into detail on these specific structures, but just want to note that we kind of identified 4 different structures that really seem to hold promise for addressing some of the early concerns we had heard about TZD and that were identified in that case for change. And that's not to say one of these structures need to be adopted kind of as kind of complete packages. There are ability to kind of mix and match, but these were kind of the 4 that seemed to show the most promise and that we kind of kept in our minds as we were kind of continuing this work and looking to draft recommendations. We also conducted an equity crash analysis. Equity was identified by the TZD leadership as really important to kind of consider throughout this project and equity as it relates to traffic safety and TZD's work. So we wanted to kind of understand just some of the equity considerations we might want to look at or incorporate more. And so we looked at equity indicators using census data, demographic data, and crash data from MnDOT as well as from the FAR system. And one of the ways we looked at this data was to do kind of a location quotient analysis. And this really looks at kind of the concentration of crashes. And we looked at it by county, given the granularity of the data we had, to kind of see where were certain crash types, more concentrated or less concentrated. And I won't go into the details of every crash type, but generally in looking at these maps, the more red a county is, the more of those crashes are concentrated there. The more blue a county is, there's kind of fewer of those crashes there, kind of compared to the statewide average. So you can see that there's definitely differences around the state in terms of crash types and where they are concentrated. We also looked at Title VI population, the concentration of kind of Title VI population as it related to different crash types. And what we found is that these Title VI populations were really overrepresented in areas that had a lot of pedestrian, bicycle, and unlicensed crash types. And lastly, we looked at kind of the FARS data, which provides race and ethnicity information for traffic deaths. And you can see kind of just the output of the analysis here is that American Indian and Alaska Native populations were really overrepresented in traffic fatality crashes. And so what does this all mean as we look to the future of TZD? There's obviously a lot in there, and there's, I think, a lot of potential to continue to use that different type of analysis to inform strategies, tactics, emphasis areas, things like that. But for the purposes of this project, really some of the key takeaways for kind of the operations and structure of TZD is that certain crash types are more of a concern in specific geographies, and that it'll be important to allow a program to tailor approaches based on geography. Also noting that Title VI communities are overrepresented in pedestrian, bicycle, and unlicensed crashes. Again, kind of TZD as a program, making sure that it's structured to be able to focus on different crash types within specific communities. And lastly, kind of that the finding that Minnesota's tribal communities are overrepresented in fatal crashes. We specifically reached out to tribal liaisons for input into this process and kind of to use that to help shape kind of some of the direction of where our recommendations will go. So we also looked at peer agency interviews. We connected with Norway, New Jersey, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Iowa. And these were really seen as kind of states or countries with safety programs that were kind of successful and had potential for lessons learned from Minnesota or for Minnesota. So some of the key takeaways from that work is that really Minnesota is a model for others. Most, if not all, of these programs mentioned looking to Minnesota for guidance, for lessons learned, for examples and kind of a structure to follow. We also, many said that executive level coordination is really important to the success of their work. Formal structures or informal networks can both work. There was kind of a mix within these programs. Some had programs that were very structured, and others had programs that were just fully integrated into different programs. And I think a couple of the key takeaways within that is for those that had structures, they needed resources to make those structures work. For those that had informal networks, the success really depended on very strong commitments of support and really robust integration within the different agencies involved. Programs needed, and some other takeaways are that safety programs need to be able to quickly react to data trends, support participation from all stakeholders, provide meaningful assistance to local agencies, and kind of promote positive collaboration and communication, regardless of who's in specific positions, kind of be built to last and through changes in staff. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keiko to talk a little bit more about our engagement work and kind of understanding the current state of TZD.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, so after we sort of did understanding the possibilities, we really wanted to understand the current state, and undertook and designed a pretty robust engagement process that was multifaceted, and it included the TZD Regional Workshops, the steering committee. We did interviews with both new voices and existing stakeholders, as well as a statewide survey of mostly existing TZD stakeholders. And we had, through this, we engaged, hundreds of participants from, just the survey, which were briefer responses, but to really in-depth one-on-one interviews. And then we summarized our engagement, and we created an engagement dashboard so those involved in the project could go to the engagement dashboard and see the progress, see some of the key messages, see some of the summaries that we were getting as we did these engagements. So as you mentioned, we did all the TZD regional workshops, of which many of you may have been a part of, and that was at the front end of this engagement, to really understand from people who are participating what's working well and where are some of the challenges. We also had a steering committee that we touched base with throughout the project to sense check some of the things you were hearing, to get some direction, to get their input. And this, was a big group that involved a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different lenses and levels of engagement. So what you see here is sort of the roles and the organizations that are represented on our steering committee, who we connected with and touched base throughout. And everything from our TZD co-chairs and the Christine, our statewide coordinator, to some of our regional coordinators and our law enforcement liaisons, people from different departments of the three current co-chair agencies, which is MnDOT, Department of Public Safety, and Department of Health. Of course, we had the State Patrol and the U, and then engineers and researchers at the city, the county level, as well as local law enforcement, and then the federal traffic safety and traffic administration organizations. We also, as mentioned, we did one-on-one, or sometimes there were small group interviews with people, both existing stakeholders as well as new voices that haven't traditionally been part of TZD, but who we heard from our other engagement either could be, should be, or we wanted to connect in some ways. And so you can see here the list of the categories and the roles of the existing stakeholders that we interviewed, as well as the new voices, which included, looking into some of the different staffing roles at the partner organizations. So equity roles, communications roles, connecting with our tribal liaisons with each of our partner organizations, or the partner agencies as well, looking at public health, community health, judges, and then elected officials at every level, from the state level to city, county, and then law enforcement at the local level as well. So this is all helping us to understand the current state. What did we hear? What did we hear about what's working well? And these are things that, as we move forward in sort of the next generation of TZD, we want to make sure to keep these elements and enhance them. And so what we heard consistently across all of the engagement and all of the audience about what was working really strongly was that the cross-agency collaboration was working, getting people out of their silos, and then having this multidisciplinary approach of the 5 E's all working together, the education, enforcement, EMS, engineering, and everyone else working together at the local level, all through up to the co-chair agencies. That's what we heard consistently. Other things that we heard recurring throughout our engagement was that TZD has innovative strategies, that there's local empowerment, local leadership and ownership of activities and initiatives, that there are some effective education and some effective communication materials for the current focus of TZD, and partners are appreciative of those. Again, the opportunity to share from others and learn ideas and work across agencies. That TZD provides some funding opportunities, connecting local organizations with various grants and such, and that TZD has good tools and resources for our partner organizations at the local level. So those are some of the key things that we heard about what's working. But we also really dove into, wanted to ask people, like, what's not working? What are some of the challenges? What are aspects of TZD that might be able to be improved or be addressed through this to this project? So again, in that top box are the things that we heard consistently across the engagement, regardless of the level or the lens. And the things that we heard consistently were that culture and individual behavior is really hard to change. That there's a lack of public understanding and awareness, and this is both of TZD as a program, as well as about traffic safety in general. That there may be an imbalance between the agency influence and that driving, whether it's funding, staffing, activities, tone, approach, and that sometimes can be a challenge. And that just as an organizational, there is some unclear decision-making in how TZD operates. Those were the things that we heard consistently. And then things we heard often are these bullets below. And those are things like there's not enough staff support, or sometimes it's not the right skill sets in the right place at the right time. That as always, there could be more political support at every level, that there's not enough participation or buy-in across those E's, across those partners, or from the public. And that in some cases, that there's a need for different or better messaging or a different type of or tone of communication strategies for various audiences or various geographies or the various challenges. That in general, TZD, there's a lack of diversity and cultural sensitivity in some of the efforts and activities of TZD. The current climate towards enforcement is a definite challenge that inhibits some of the ability to affect traffic safety. That we heard there was not enough reliance on data in the decision-making process or understanding how and when data is used in the decision-making process. And then, as always, that there's not enough funding, and that the funding that is available is often very difficult to use, very restrictive, inflexible, and very onerous on the grant requirements and reporting requirements. So those are some of the things that we heard. And then sort of part and parcel that we heard all throughout, but we wanted to call out specifically was what are some of the key considerations for incorporating equity? As we heard, one of the challenges was the lack of diversity and cultural sensitivity. And so, the current co-chairs really want to make sure that equity is a key consideration going forward. And so what are those considerations for incorporating equity into making TZD a more equitable program? And some of these include localizing decision-making, incorporating more direct community involvement to make sure those messages are resonating with the communities that we are trying to be reached, to make sure we develop and encourage a multifaceted approach to traffic safety, that a one-size-fits-all approach is going to be inequitable. And likewise, hand in hand with that is to be able to tailor messaging and tailor strategies to specific communities and the specific challenges that are faced by those communities. And then just sort of as a guiding principle, that equity isn't a standalone thing, even though we also do want to call it out. But equity is something that needs to be incorporated through all decisions, through all activities, through all the program. The equity lens needs to be applied to that. So even though our engagement and listening is still ongoing, we wanted to say, what did we hear? What does this present to us? What are the opportunities areas? So, we took all of the input and all of the things that we heard through all of the engagement areas, the interviews, the lit review, the org design review, the equity analysis, the stakeholder engagement, to say, what are the opportunities to enhance TZD through either program structure and or operations to increase overall effectiveness of the program, which means therefore to move towards zero deaths and towards zero serious injuries. So this is the next phase, is analyzing the opportunities. And based on what we heard, we sort of identified these 5 opportunity areas that would allow us allow TZD to be more effective. 4 of these fall sort of within the operations area. And addressing these operational areas would allow TZD to build a strong foundation that builds on current strengths and the current focus, and then also allow to be add additional focus areas. So the top one is an opportunity area to add focus. And this is really talking about adding a focus of building a culture of traffic safety in Minnesota. And by adding this focus area, we'll get to this a little bit more in the next area where we're talking about some of the initial recommendation ideas. This will address the fact that behavior is hard to change. By building on a culture of traffic safety, we'll be able to move the needle on that individual behavior. One of the things that we heard is that the current messaging doesn't draw from culture change best practices. So by adding a traffic safety culture will allow us to address that, and that more partners need to be involved so that we have a more holistic view of traffic safety, in addition to the efforts, the successful efforts that has been the foundation of TZD historically. The next opportunity area is really communications, and this is both internal and external. So first, there's a great opportunity to better coordinate and streamline the internal communications within TZD. And what we heard that needs to be addressed is that there's a need for more standard information materials, as well as standardize the information flow up, down, and across TZD. There's a need for more clarity of focus and a clarity of priorities from leadership. There's a challenge that communication isn't always timely. And so better coordination and streamlining of internal communications will help with that. That there's currently a challenge about how to provide leadership sort of ground up direction and communication, and that we need more intentional outreach to build those strong new partnerships and with new partners, as well as stronger relationships with existing partners. So clarifying and coordinating how TZD communicates with its internal TZD partners is definitely an area for opportunity. But there's also an opportunity for a better coordination and a shift in focus of external communication. And this will help to address some of the concerns we heard about there being a need to have greater program awareness of TZD, both by potential partners, and the general public. That there needs to be better coordination and traffic safety messaging among partners, that the various partners are coming at traffic safety with different lenses and different focus areas and different approaches, and that having a coordinated umbrella messaging that's consistent and can leverage all of the expertise of the partners, but yet still maintain a consistent and consistent communication externally to the public would be extremely helpful. Currently that a lot of the messaging and branding is too focused on scare tactics, and that might be effective in a slice of behavior change, but in terms of shifting culture and creating a traffic safety culture, there's definitely an opportunity area to have a different approach layered on top of for the messaging and the branding TZD. And then finally, just an opportunity to think more creatively about how to engage specific audiences. And this is where some of the equity issues come into place, both the messaging as well as how the outreach, the mode of outreach and the tactics of outreach on external communications. So there's really 2 buckets of opportunity in communication, both internal and external. The third area of opportunity is data. And this pulls on some of the things that we really heard was a really exciting opportunity area for leveraging, leaning, and coordinating data, and really having TZD become a hub for traffic safety data research and using that to drive decision-making in the program. So there's opportunity areas to draw on, whether TZD is drawing from the right or the current or the best available data. a need to share data in a more timely and more consistent manner, that our local partners are really benefit from having coordinated data, whether it's dashboards or regular reports about data, for them to like greater understand what's happening in their community. The opportunity to broaden some of the research areas where that are supported by TZD, and making sure that we're really putting support behind finding out some of the root cause behind some of the traffic safety issues, and that to make sure that there's a consistent use of data and understanding of how data is used and when it's used to inform decision making for programming and activities, and to make sure that everybody understands where the data is coming from and that it's trusted and valid sources of data. And that TZD really has the opportunity to become that hub, and a trusted resource for all of our local partners to move forward in a data-based traffic safety program priorities. And then our fourth area is really to address some of the resource gaps that we heard about, that there's restrictions on some of the funding and challenges presented by inflexibility of some of the current resources. And that's both reporting requirements or amounts, or what can be done within the current resources. So that there's some of the lack of funding at the local level. And so having more flexibility, more resources, as well as more sort of autonomy at the local level and more discretion about the types of activities that can be done, and the resources to support that. And then there's also making sure that the right skill sets and the right expertise are being leveraged, are at the TZD table. And this includes both at the state level as well as at the local level, to make sure that we're leveraging those people who know about creating a traffic safety culture, who know about effective engineering solves, and they can come together and make sure that the right people are at the table and contributing that their expertise in the right ways and at the right time. And then finally, the last sort of big bucket of opportunity was around sort of clarifying the roles and decision rights within the TZD program, and sort of formalizing how decisions are made, who's empowered to make what decisions when. And so this is just about providing more clarity and guidance about roles, where decisions lie, what the relationships between the different levels of TZD are, and how to make a decision and when is it going to escalate, so that things can keep moving forward and can be responsive to what's happening really on the ground. So given all those 5 big buckets of opportunities, what does this mean? So really, moving to a new state, we sort of see that, TZD, there's sort of these 2 big buckets of what TZD can focus on. And that's, a traffic safety culture, which is making safe choices the norm, as well as a safe system approach. And these really go hand in hand. They're not completely separate, but they are a different way than what TZD has been done in the past. It's sort of layering on this traffic safety culture component. So that's what TZD can do, but how TZD can sort of effectively create both a culture of traffic safety and a safe system approach. That's the how, the foundation. And that's a combination of organizational operation opportunities where we can improve the ways of working to increase the effectiveness of the program, as well as organizational structure, making sure that the right support, the right resources, and the right expertise exist and are plugged in the right way at the right time to provide that structure to make those things happen. So now sort of to click into each one of those boxes. One on the what is building a culture of traffic safety. And really a culture of traffic safety is created through positive community norming, which is something that's a little bit new to TZD. this was a stated priority of this Minnesota Strategic Highway Safety Plan in 2020. But that plan didn't really talk about who or how to do this. So, we're recommending like looking at a positive community norming approach to really build a lasting traffic safety culture in Minnesota. And at the root, this approach is about engaging at the community level to drive change, having a positive focus driven by strength and a belief that there are solutions to this. An example of sort of how this has happened in the past is, over time, how attitudes have changed about things like recycling or anti-smoking. And as attitudes shift, behavior then follows. And that's really how you create a true lasting transformation to traffic safety culture. Another quick example is that's happening right now is Minnesota's Department of Health is doing a lot of work with the same approach to try to shift the thinking and therefore the behavior around youth alcohol use. So there's a lot of positive community norming and culture building in the Department of Health currently. So that's one of the boxes, is building a culture of traffic safety. The other big box of the what TZD can be in that opportunity area is this safe systems approach. And this is historically a lot of the activities that TZD has done historically that's been extremely successful has a safe system approach. This is sort of in line with this is a Federal Highway Administration approach. And this is where, to design and operate a traffic system and structures to protect against human mistakes and protect against and create injury tolerances so that when traffic accidents do happen, they don't result in fatalities or serious injuries. And even if this terminology about some of these pie pieces, about safe vehicles or safe roads, some of that might be new, and the whole safe systems approach, this is really a lot of the things that TZD has historically done and historically focused and been extremely successful in falls within this framework of the safe systems approach. So moving forward, to have both a focus on both traffic safety culture and safe systems, it still leverages all 5 E's that have been part of TZD and historically. However, it's going to leverage them in slightly different ways and in slightly different degrees. That traditionally, engineering, enforcement, and EMS have had a really strong role, a really strong say in the safe systems sort of activities and approach. And education and everything else have been present, but in slightly smaller, slightly secondary, and in different ways. And that sort of will be flipped with traffic safety culture. And traffic safety culture education and community organizations and the social institutions of everyone else play a bigger role to create those community norms around traffic safety culture. But engineering, EMS, and enforcement also have an important role to play in traffic safety culture. So this is to just sort of say that moving or layering on a traffic safety culture focus is going to leverage our existing stakeholders in new and different ways, in addition to the ways they've contributed in the past, and also leverage new expertise. So this is just sort of another way to think about it, is that the engineering, enforcement, EMS still plays a really significant role. And as we grow and layer on a traffic safety culture focus, there will be an overall increase in resources and an increase and a shift in the types of roles that our various partners and the various E's can play, with the goal to regain that momentum and moving towards zero death as we layer on both, continue with the safe systems focus and layer on the traffic safety culture. And then with that, I'm going to flip it back to Katie to talk about sort of, given what we heard and some of the opportunity areas, what comes next? What does this mean and the implementation of that?
Thanks, Keiko. And I'll just note that this is where we are in the process, is we've identified these opportunities and now we're working through what does this all mean. But just to kind of go back to this this slide that Keiko talked through, really our recommendations, when this project is over, we'll really focus on these orange boxes here, the organizational operations and the organizational structure, really with the intention of how can TZD be set up and operating to be as successful as possible in supporting the work of these blue boxes and the work of all of the traffic safety partners in Minnesota. So some of the questions that we're currently working through right now, and answering these questions will kind of shape the final recommendations and the implementation of all this going forward. Kind of 2 core areas related to program structure and kind of 4 areas then kind of related, but more about operations. So the program structure ones are really, does TZD need additional TZD specific staff to provide that focus, clarity, balance, and cross-cutting collaboration? And if so, what are those roles? Where are they housed? How are they funded? A lot of kind of really big questions to work through. We also are asking the question of what additional partners need to be at the table particularly to support that building a culture of traffic safety in Minnesota. What are those agencies? What's the best way to partner with them, and at what levels do those partnerships need to exist? From the operations side, some of the core questions we're working through are how does TZD, how can TZD be operating to kind of most improve communications across internal partners? Similarly, how can TZD operate differently to improve that external facing communications and develop that kind of cohesive brand awareness and communication to the public? How does TZD better leverage data and use that to inform and drive decisions at all levels and in all types of work? And how can TZD improve the overall clarity of roles and decision making within the traffic safety program? And so I won't spend, these are also very much in the works. I don't want to spend too much time on them, but wanted to kind of give you a little flavor of the types of things we're considering. What could a new structure look like? Really, the reason we're talking about a new structure is that it has the potential to add critical resources, capabilities, and clarity at the statewide level to support the work of TZD partners. This would look like kind of adopting a new structure, identifying those key roles, and either reassigning or hiring staff for gaps or to fill those roles. Some of the things that we're thinking about as it relates to structure are, potential additional partners at that kind of executive leadership level, maybe an executive director type role, maybe more additional statewide roles to coordinate operations, internal and external communications, and data and research, kind of providing that coordination support to make the program operate smoothly and to provide that information and clarity to local partners. And then also looking at how can we really emphasize the empowerment of the regions and kind of that local work. So when you think about new partners, what could that look like? Is really trying to find those partners with that kind of positive community norming expertise, that education expertise at all levels. Some that we're thinking about are additional ways to leverage expertise within the Department of Health, as well as the potential to maybe bring in the Department of Education, Human Services and any of these at kind of the statewide or potentially regional or local levels. And really adding new partners, the goal there is to leverage the existing expertise that exists within Minnesota and those existing relationships that can really help build that culture of traffic safety. So, when you think about coordinated communications, that's really, from an operational standpoint, would look like developing a kind of a TZD communication strategy, both for internal and external communications, and, really focused on helping to coordinate messaging amongst all the partner agencies, as well as identifying gaps and addressing those. And, in terms of kind of looking at the data piece, what would it look like to kind of better leverage data? Really, the goal of this is to kind of increase that data-informed decision-making and the awareness of the data-informed decision-making. And kind of some of the things we're talking through is there a role for that kind of statewide coordination and around data and research to kind of make sure that traffic safety partners in Minnesota have the best and most up-to-date data as possible that kind of supports all the work of all the 5 E's in traffic safety, and how do coordinate that at a statewide level into best practices, dashboards, useful products that will help inform work at all levels. And lastly, just looking at kind of that clarity in decision making and clarifying roles and streamlining decision making, and really that looks like just kind of helping to identify what decisions kind of happen at which levels and which roles are involved, and how does the communication then flow between the different roles and the different decisions. And so just to end here, kind of what's next, that was kind of a flavor of what we heard and what we learned and what opportunities we see, as well as kind of the things we're grappling with right now with TZD leadership and stakeholders. And so what comes next is, this will be a process for implementation. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. The change and the evolution of TZD will take time. So what we're working on right now is, continuing to discuss these questions we just kind of teed up for you with TZD leadership and stakeholders. We're using input from those conversations to kind of refine draft recommendations, as well as starting to kind of build out what specific next steps, could look like for consideration and discussion amongst TZD leaders and partners. And so with that, we'll kind of wrap up and maybe open it up to questions, just kind of give you a sense of what we've been up to this last year and where we're headed, and would love to provide clarity or talk about answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thanks, Katie and Keiko. Before we get to questions, we'd like if everyone can take a minute to fill out our evaluation survey. A link to an evaluation can be found in the chat box, and it'll be emailed to you, or you can use your phone's camera and hover over this QR code to fill out the form right on your phone. And the TZD leadership team does read all the evaluations and the results from the survey and uses this information for future events. So thank you for filling it out. Okay, questions. I thought I saw one come in. You touched on that the next steps have not been identified yet, and the TZD leadership is working on this. Can you give us more information on what the timeline might look like?
I could take a stab at this, and I might actually have Mark Kindy hop on too. I think we're working to kind of flesh out what are the actual recommendations that TZD wants to move forward with, and what would that look like right now. I don't know that there's not a hard by X date TZD will be in this new state, but it will be a process and something we kind of continue to work through. So, but Mark, I don't know, as one of the TZD leaders working through this, if you have anything to add.
No, I think you really described it well. I guess first my reaction in looking at the graphics, I really like the different graphics that both of you used. I'm thinking of when that crystallized, I was thinking of the funnel that you had with the different kind of balls of topics in the funnel area. And I thought, there are some things that I need to learn on graphics for slide presentation. So great graphics. And I think both of you really captured this sense of where we're at. I was thinking as you were presenting about, I'm not an archaeologist or a geologist, but I pay attention to things I like being out in the woods and the swamps and the forests, especially this time of year. And so I'm paying attention to how things are shaped and built. And so some of what you were describing in the early pictures reminded me of that paying attention to the foundation and exploring what's underneath what we can see on top. And so that was kind of one metaphor idea. The other piece I was thinking about is that this whole process of change can be a little sometimes unnerving, I hadn't seen my youngest nephew for a month, and last time I was with him, I was looking down at him, and now I'm looking up at him, and he grew 1.5 inches in a month. And it's great, for his parents they're buying new clothes and new shoes and everything else. So it's unnerving that way for them. But so this process of change, I think when we're in it, we sometimes don't see it right away, right? But when there's this gap between, so our colleagues from surrounding states are going to peer in and say, oh, wow, look at what they've done and look at what they're doing. And we are going to be, oh yeah, okay, we did make some changes. So I think there's just this idea that, as you described the process, Katie, it is exactly that. And it's going to be some things incremental. All of a sudden there'll be some hires and some new program components, and then we'll say, oh yeah, things have changed. But the process of getting there, and we who are living in state government are kind of used to process, sometimes things taking a long time. Anyway, thank you. I had so one other bonus question. I was trying to figure out how the Q&A piece worked, but I am weak on what a Title VI community is, and maybe if you can just explain that. And you may have explained it. I was just trying to focus on what it was and the understanding of that, and I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I probably didn't clarify that well enough. So a Title VI community is really looking at racial and ethnic minorities, low income, specifically based on the kind of Title VI legislation. But it's kind of some of those priority populations for kind of traffic safety and underrepresented communities.
Okay, we did have someone say that they appreciate that we're going to be using the positive community norms going forward. There was a question about whose expertise can we utilize for that? And you kind of touched on it, but I'll let you maybe expand.
Yeah, I'll just say that, there is some of this expertise within, potential partners or existing partners within kind of state government in Minnesota. Specifically the Department of Health has folks that have worked in this area, as well as the Department of Human Services has folks working on grant programs kind of in this area. And there's also, researchers in this area. There's also, it's a pretty established kind of sociological approach. And so there is that expertise. And so I think a core part of our recommendation is, leverage the expertise that already exists in Minnesota for this, and, potentially go find those new partners or those new people that you can bring in to really apply this type of approach and this expertise to traffic safety. And that's the piece that hasn't necessarily happened in a really coordinated way yet, the way it has around some other topic areas that Keiko mentioned, where we have seen a culture shift.
I will say that all of myself, as well as all, I think, but one of the regional TZD coordinators have went through the the safety culture training that Montana State has offered online this year. So we're learning more about it every day, and obviously following the public health model that Department of Health has out there. So I will tease out too, we're also exploring for the TZD workshops in the spring that we have every April and May across the state. We have 8 workshops that we're, fingers crossed, they're going to be in person, but we are looking at maybe bringing in some professionals to talk more about traffic safety culture and what we can do from a TZD perspective around changing behaviors. And obviously, like we said, it's not a quick fix. Changing a behavior and a culture takes 8 to 10 years. We've seen it with seatbelt use and, getting a sober ride home, changing those norms takes a very long time. So there was another question that came in about the infrastructure and safe systems. We had a massive transportation bill that just passed. Can any of that funding be used to do more than encourage behavior change? It's well noted that people are going to make mistakes. And do we have more specifics related to the safe systems, how to slow people down, keeping vulnerable road users safe? How does that relate to the 2.0 process?
Yeah, and I'll just note that there is, I think we spent more time talking about what's like the newer aspects of kind of the opportunities we see, which is really layering on that culture building piece. But a big piece of TZD going forward is still to continue that safe system work and continue to refine that and focus more on that. And that includes a lot of infrastructure, building a system that is safe when people make mistakes or make poor choices. There are also ways that infrastructure can encourage people to make better choices. And I think that's part of kind of that culture building too. And so I think there's a lot that infrastructure can do, both to help, encourage safe choices, as well as to provide a safe system when people make poor choices as well. And so I think, and that can be through direct safety programs, but that can also be just through how infrastructure more broadly is designed and implemented as well. So something to think about as new infrastructure money and new projects are starting to be developed is how are we incorporating both helping encourage people make safe choices, as well as helping to create infrastructure that is safe when people make poor choices.
And I would only just add that yes, definitely going through what new funding opportunities are there in the new infrastructure bill, and seeing how can those be leveraged to support some of the new direction of TZD 2.0 with maybe some of these new roles, these new program activities, this focus area, these partners, to really go through the new infrastructure bill with a fine-tooth comb and find out, because one of the challenges we heard was the challenges of some of the existing funding. So to explore this new pots of funding potentially, and see how they can layer in and support the direction and the focus of TZD, Minnesota TZD going forward.
I think even having our conversation with the transportation officials from Norway kind of reinforced that we are really looking at how to move more into the safe system approach, more than we have in the past. We've put in rumble strips and cable median barrier. That was a big thing, even learning how to repair those barriers, and then we hear from law enforcement, well, if you close the whole barriers, then we can't get across the highway. So it's like, that's why TZD has been so helpful. It's breaking down those silos. When we first started, we were all working on traffic safety, but in our silos. And, you walk into a county meeting with our coalition partners and the sheriff wasn't talking to the engineer. So now we're talking that way. So I think that really helps with that safe system approach. And I will just add in the chat, Derek Luer, who is our state traffic safety engineer from our Office of Traffic Engineering at MnDOT, has said a big part of the infrastructure bill comes with additional funding for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, our HSIP funds, that we do trickle down to the cities and the counties. So we're going to continue that process. And like Keiko has mentioned, there is it's going to take us a while to wade through that bill, because there's a lot of money coming our way, and we're going to have to figure out the best ways to spend that. I know you talked about data and the gaps. And again, I think Minnesota does a really good job compared to other states on looking at the data. I think maybe trickling down to the local and coalitions and whatnot might be where our gap is. But do you want to speak a little more about where you think the data gaps are?
Sure. I think we We heard kind of in talking to people about kind of how challenges and opportunities, as well as what TZD does well, that there is a lot of data used in TZD right now to inform decision making. So it's not that that's not a thing, or starting from scratch there. But kind of the opportunities that we saw were really around, one, making sure that that's happening kind of at all levels and in amongst all partners. There was a sense that that wasn't necessarily like uniform across the board. Also sharing how data is informing decision making. There was a sense that maybe it is, we have a lot of data, but I don't really understand how it is influencing decisions. So part of it might just be kind of helping to share that message and clarify where and how data is being incorporated into decision making. And then the last piece is there's just the sense that there's additional types of data out there. And I think this is particularly true in kind of that culture building piece where, there's more data than just the traffic fatality numbers and the crash reports that TZD could be tapping into. I say data kind of broadly, research and data and just information that could be used to inform decision making, and just a sense that there's more of that out there, more questions that could be being answered, more root cause analysis, things like that, that could help better inform TZD. So kind of taking the data informed decision making up a level even.
And then just to layer one more piece onto that, and that is that, because as Christine mentioned, there's lots of different pieces that contribute to traffic safety. And each one of those silos has data. And so a great role for TZD to play is to be able to reach into those various agencies who have different types of data and sort of overlay them and connect them to each other, and then push them out. So, more than just engineers, because you see some of the engineering MnDOT traffic safety data and DPS data is sort of, brought together so to reach into our partner agencies, pull all the data together, sort of combine it, and see where those interactions are, and then use those and sort of push those out to really inform some of the programming and messaging. So it's like coordination of the data from lots of different sources. That's another piece, and a really important role that TZD can play is by having the sort of multi-faceted, multi-agency approach that includes the data packaging and communicating it out.
That's true. When you were even going through this process, you pulled up the census data, and we talked about the data that we should be working with Department of Health through the statewide trauma system. What happens once they're at the hospital, and the turnout, because we're just looking at the initial crash reports initially. I did get a question, are people able to provide comments on this draft framework? So what would be the best way to communicate after this?
Yeah, we can make sure that we'll update these slides to have our contact information on them before they get sent out. And feel free to reach out to Keiko or I, or send comments through kind of Christine or kind of the TZD contacts that you have. We are continuing to chat through this and kind of are welcome additional input as we go forward too.
And dashboard, maybe we can include that.
Yeah, the link in the presentation is a live link. We didn't pull it up today, but if when the slides get sent out, that will be a live link for you to see that engagement dashboard and kind of be able to dive a little bit deeper into what specific regions said or what specific kind of survey responses were.
Great. And I did see a comment. We talk about the two systems as if it must be one or the other. Can it be both? Should it be both?
I think that's in reference to kind of the culture building and the safe system kind of elements of traffic safety. And definitely should be both. I think that's kind of we called them out separately because they are different in terms of the expertise and what they focus on, the expertise they leverage, and the types of strategies that would kind of fall under them. But the goal going forward should be that it's one traffic safety program, but they're kind of tapping into and pushing both of those focus areas forward.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is a question, but it says for collecting crash data, we need to get away from the concept that a crash with under $500 damage doesn't require a state crash report. A 10-mile-per-hour crash results in over $3,000 damage. So there's really no such thing as an under $500 crash. Let's get all the crash reports. And that's probably a true statement, but I guess when we do when we're looking at crashes, we're looking at the fatalities and serious injury crashes from a TZD perspective.
And I think the goal of some of these things we're talking through, like a statewide kind of data coordinator, is to have somebody that has that focus of, what data is important to collect, who all do I need to talk to figure that out and to find it, and where are there gaps that we need to fill, and how do we go about filling them. Really the focus of these statewide roles that we've kind of been tossing around in data and communications and operations is to make sure that those things are being focused on and have kind of an owner, so that they are able to be moved forward. And this, I think that points at exactly the type of thing that somebody with that kind of hat on would be in charge of kind of owning is are we getting the right crash report data? What steps do we need to get different data, and making sure that had a home and that had an owner within kind of the statewide traffic safety work.
Good points. I see Linda did put in the dashboard link into the chat if anybody's interested in that. Okay, so we are getting towards the end of our time. I want to thank our speakers. We hope you learned something new and will share your knowledge with your colleagues. We do encourage you to follow the Minnesota TZD program on its social media platforms. And I want to thank everybody and enjoy the rest of your day.